All right. So I assume everybody can see Ryan, or at
Yes,
least you can.
yes.
All right. Fantastic. So again, thanks for the introduction, Ryan, and I'm so glad Natalie, the leader of the architecture effort at AT&T Mexico, can join us. So we're going to be talking kind of evolving the architecture practice at AT&T Mexico. So we'll do a brief, introduction of AT&T Mexico, a little recap of what we talked about last year, and then, some of the progress we've made, and then we'll dive into the details. So just a little bit about APG. Again, basically our focus is on trying to help people adopt industry standard best practices around architecture and engineering, and a big part of that is participating in standards organizations like the OMG, the Open Group, in COSI, and of course for the telecommunications industry, the TM Forum in the Open Digital Framework and Open Digital Architecture. And then Natalie, you want to tell us a little bit about AT&T Mexico?
Yes, of course. So we are in business since almost 9 years. We come from a merger between three Mexico teleco company. We arrived and took over. We represent today 13% of the market. We are the second largest telecom in Mexico. And we have 22.6 million at last month's customer and growing.
Excellent. So I'll just do a quick summary of what we kind of talked about yesterday or last year about a foundation. So the whole idea was, to uplift the architecture practice, and establish a collaborative dynamic practice, make that a way of working, try to embrace the concept of reuse. So that's one of the themes of this is trying to reuse things like TOGAF, Archimate, the TM Forum reference models, to make all these standards work together in a practical fashion. Again, continue to provide guidance and mentoring to teams across the organization, and of course have implemented a set of tools to support that. Of course, Sparx Enterprise Architect, Pro Cloud Server, and Collaborate, but we're also integrating with ServiceNow, Elation, and WSO2 to get other data into the repository. So I don't know, Natalie, if you want to talk a little bit about what we've been working on lately.
Yeah, lately we really focus on open agile architecture. We are looking to migrate all of our legacy or monolith application into component, TM Forum certified, to accelerate our transformation to a digital landscape, but also to impulse even more the TM Forum Open API and allow us to become a partner not only as telco but as data on network, thanks to the TM Forum Open API and Camara consortium. So the company is opening the way to become a provider of data as a service and network as a service.
And then, as we'll talk a little bit about, kind of recent development that's gained a lot of momentum is to try to capture a set of patterns that are going to guide how people, make this transition from monolithic to event-driven microservices. And of course, updated our meta model. We'll give you a peek to that. And there's also been some progress made in the alignment with the Digital Transformation Office as it relates to mapping to value streams and capabilities, and also kicking off some API governance and just some tool updates. We've upgraded to the latest and greatest from Sparx. And I've got some cool little tool things we'll show you along the way around Collaborate. And we're also exploring, as many people are, I think, what role artificial intelligence is going to have in architecture. And so we started to kick off a pilot project at AT&T Mexico to explore those options.
Correct.
So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Natalie, or if that's good enough.
No, that's summarized
Right.
pretty good.
So pretty similar, but not going to dwell too much on this because this is just really, again, reflecting what we started with a couple years ago. Really, the only major difference is that while we're certainly using TOGAF and the architecture development method, we're being formed by open agile architecture to try to execute that life cycle in a modern agile format. And it's possible that there might be folks in the meeting that haven't heard of this before. So again, open agile architecture is it's not really a new, it's a newer standard. It's been around for several years, but it's basically a collection of best practices that borrows from other efforts such as continuous architecture, scaled agile, and domain-driven design. And if you look at the manifesto in the upper left, I mean, it's basically that, architects really need to be involved in the lifetime of products, not just, project-level solutions. We want to architect our product with a, holistic end-to-end view, the system as a whole. We don't want to just build architecture models. We want to validate and prove that it's worked by actually, implementing the architecture. Make sure that we understand that architecture is, again, a team activity, not just something that is done solely by architects. We need to kind of take the agile approach of deferring making critical decisions to the last possible moment, but no later. And again, start, sharing, and building and proving out the architecture by building out critical customer features. So I could give a whole talk just on open agile architecture, but this is just to try to set the starting point for this. And so a part of that has been, trying to describe to the architecture community, what's going to be the life cycle of doing work. So we've crafted a new architecture method based on open agile architecture. Again, not going to get into the gory details, but a big part of this is trying to really, and you can certainly talk to this, Nathalie, but really trying to elevate the work of the architects out of often being team leads in individual projects, but really, elevate them into, contributing more to strategy and visibility.
In our case, it's really trying to move away from application architect and to really become solution architect. And as we are a reduced number, or a limited number, so what's the best way for us to organize ourselves and to be able to still oversee everything without to increase or multiply the workforce?
Yep, and a big part of that is that, other team members are going to be taking on additional responsibilities that perhaps the architects used to do. And as many know, architects get asked to do a lot of things that really aren't architecture, but because they tend to be pretty skilled and experienced, they're a natural, target by project managers to help out. But like continuous architecture says, architecture is a team activity. There needs to be a sharing of responsibilities across the complete life cycle. And a part of the method is trying to make it clear what types of artifacts the solution architects need to create. So this is just an example. In the lower right-hand corner, we've kind of partitioned them into EA artifacts, portfolio artifacts, solution artifacts, and governance artifacts. I'm pretty sure these are the solution artifacts. So things like a solution vision, context diagram, again, a high-level application and deployment diagram, and then a number of different models to try to demonstrate how the solution is aligned or not with the target architecture. A big part of, again, as some may know, particularly with scaled agile, is focusing on an MVP, a minimum viable product, and as many may know, that's really supposed to be designed to try to see if the vision of the product has any, if it connects with the customer particularly, and it's going to be something useful. So it tends to focus more on features, but then so we want to be careful about introducing too much hardcore architecture too early, particularly if the MVP ends up demonstrating that it's not a good idea. So we really want to, jump in after the MVP to provide this agile architecture guidance. And a part of that is, we've had a tradition at AT&T Mexico in keeping track of all project artifacts in the EA repository. We had a template that kind of represented the legacy old method of doing stuff. Well, now that we were transitioning to open agile architecture, we've got a new template. So this is the organization structure that people are expected to follow when they do the Agile architecture method. And one of the things that came out of that, actually from our legacy work, is being able to publish a dashboard about a project without having to manually assemble it. So this was a new tool thing that we created. It's basically a script that runs in Enterprise Architect, where you pick a package, and then it will basically go through all of the diagrams and the elements and child packages and all the child diagrams, and automatically build a dashboard of diagram thumbnails. And so this is, again, another part of how we're trying to leverage the platform to help us accelerate projects and not have architects have to do a lot of messing around in tools to expose their content to stakeholders. And then just to give you guys a little bit of an update, we had a particular way of crafting our landing page in Collaborate 3, which is where we were coming from. And then, due to some changes in how dashboards work, we came up with a different approach. But the whole idea is that we want to really provide, without having to go look in the dashboard drop down, which in our case, I think we have, Nathalie, upwards of 150 dashboards.
Yes.
There's a lot of information.
We are to get lost.
Yep, and so having some way to help people navigate to find that content is how we built this, again, collection of landing pages, starting with the main landing page that allows us to get the different types of content. And a big part of this is grounding this in a refined meta model. So people that may have joined us last year might find this familiar because it is somewhat similar. But again, our focus is significantly on the things on the right. So in particular, still focusing around business applications, which are those pieces of software that are registered in ServiceNow. And we're trying to do two things with that. One, kind of from an agile architecture position, we want to be able to keep track of architecture decisions that are made about evolving, improved, and new business applications. And then when decisions are made that perhaps don't follow architect recommendations because of real world issues about time and money, we want to keep track of technical debt, associated with those decisions, so that that doesn't get lost, as it often does in many organizations. And then we've got, of course, a mapping to a critical part of the TM Forum's open digital architecture, namely a family of ODA components that are mapped to open APIs, and then trying to understand a little bit better which APIs that are currently in the AT&T Mexico landscape, which of those should conform to the TM Forum open APIs. It's not going to be 100% match all the time. But again, as Nathalie said earlier, trying to make sure that new development is aligned with the open digital architecture as much as is feasible. So Nathalie, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about some of the work we've been doing with the Digital Transformation Office.
Yeah, so what we were having all of our value stream per safe definition, where everybody, all of the software factory within the company, and we were having ourselves as architects to identify which functionality, which business domain, which capability we were really working on. So we made this little bit not easy job to go factory value stream initiative on map to the value stream of the BA Guild on the capabilities to get to the level of the business process of the TM Forum. And that to allow us to see where we were spending all of our money or time on, see what we could improve to adjust with our strategy.
And as many people know, a lot of challenges many organizations have is because of how the business is organized and then how the IT is organized to support the business. There's a lot of people changing the same kinds of things for different reasons in different technologies and different applications. And, this is an important step that we found to try to help bring awareness to this to executive management so they can make informed decisions about, spending money and allocating resources wisely to get the outcomes that are required to support the business strategy. And so a big part of what we're going to, what we started several months ago, and is going to be a big part of our, story in the upcoming year, well, more than a year probably, but is, alignment with the TM Forum's open digital architecture. And a big part of that is described by a set of what are called ODA components. And you can see that in the upper left image, where each of the ODA components is represented by a hexagon. And that's really a call out, as many may know, to the idea of a hexagonal architecture pattern, where we have basic, because ultimately these ODA components are logical representations of microservices. So a completely standalone, self independent, deployable software asset. And as Nathalie mentioned, one of the programs at the TM Forum is there are, I forget the number, but there are a lot of vendors that have gotten their solutions certified by the TM Forum to be conformant with the requirements of each of these components, as well as conformant with the open APIs that each of those solutions maps to. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more to the strategy there, Nathalie, particularly around package implementations.
Yeah, well, we started our open digital transformation 2 years back, concentrating, trying to remove relevance of some of our dinosaur or monolith applications. And this year, next year, we have a plan to incorporate, in addition of the core commerce management and the party management, go work more in, if you want, by 2027, we want to be able to have 80% of our capabilities handled through ODA components on Open API TM Forum certified. Why? Not only because we want flexibility, we want to remove dependence with some provider. We want to avoid black box that we have today, but we also want to be able to interconnect with the telecom world, with all of the companies who will want to have service with us, and how the best way that to be using this architecture where we all expect and speak the same language.
Yep. And of course, and a big part of modern application development in most organizations is you should reserve the funding, resources, and associated risk with custom software development to those places where it really is essential. And so I think a part of AT&T Mexico's strategy is, if there's a vendor solution out there that meets our requirements, that's aligned with the TM Forum and certified, that really, we should be looking at those solutions first. And, only through, exceptional circumstances would we disqualify them and decide we can do better ourselves. So again, trying to make sure that, because software development, as we all know, is an inherently risky thing. And it should be, and custom software development really should be reserved to those places that we've decided really represent a competitive differentiation where that type of investment, makes sense. So just for people that, perhaps aren't familiar with all this, in the lower right-hand corner, well, firstly, in the upper right-hand corner is a representation of core commerce management, as Nathalie was talking about, in Enterprise Architect. So just FYI, as people might know, you can turn custom style on. And one of the things you can do is you can turn the rectangles into different multi-sided polygons. So we were able to transform those into the hexagons. But then, it's more than just the hexagons. The TM Forum has a detailed spec for each one of these components that not only identifies which ETOM business processes, which are the yellow rounded rectangles in the bottom, are applicable to this component, what are called the SID aggregate business entities, so parts of the information model. Those are the dashed yellow rectangles at the bottom. But even more importantly, as Nathalie was talking about, interconnectivity within AT&T Mexico as well as outside through data and network as a service, showing which open APIs, which are the blue boxes on the outside, does this this ODA component consume? So those are dependent APIs. In this case, they're on the left hand side for the most part. And then which open APIs does this ODA component expose or implement? Because that's how we can figure out how all those different components are going to work together. And of course, as everybody knows, this is really not a new idea. It's been around for many decades, but a lot of organizations find it really difficult to deliver upon that. And the TM Forum just provides a lot of great assets and services to make that a reality. And then one of the things that is being done, again, per the meta model, is a mapping of a core BSS and OSS, as they're called in the telco business and operational support systems. How do the current applications map to these ODA components? And we're planning on doing a 4-level mapping. We're really just finishing up the first level, which is doing a mapping from those applications, which again are coming from ServiceNow, of which of these applications implement the functionality of the ODA components, but aren't doing it with the open APIs. But at least from a process and a data and a functional perspective, they do perform the same functions. But then the next level is going to be mapping, as particularly we're going to be doing migration from a couple of monolithic applications very soon. How those are going to get decomposed into ODA-based microservices. And then we're going to show which applications, either fully implement all of the APIs of an ODA component, and that'll be a different colored circle, or partially implement the APIs. Because again, not necessarily one piece of software is going to implement all of them in every single case. And then the 4th level that we're going to get to eventually is mapping which ODA components does this piece of software depend upon. But this was this visualization, again, is based on the mappings that exist in the repository, but again, was created from a script in Enterprise Architect to generate this kind of custom traceability view in Collaborate. So whenever we update the mappings, we can regenerate this matrix, knowing that it's always going to be up to date and consistent with what we see in the repository. And then, this is just, showing some different views of the same thing, because that matrix is kind of pretty big. As many people know, matrices are great ways to show, what things are connected and what things aren't connected, but you kind of have to read the whole row or the whole column to kind of get a sense of how it all aggregates. So this, helps us validate what, is obvious when you look at it, that a great number of these core applications are supporting bill generation. Bill generation, party management, bill calculation, product configuration management, payment management. And again, these are, I don't think, Nathalie, these are surprising, since those are really important parts of the enterprise. But, there's a great opportunity here for, some consolidation, into a smaller set of core strategic applications. And then, I'm sorry, go ahead, Nathalie.
That is even more in our case that we come in reality from 3 companies who became a 4th one. So we still have a legacy application where making sense in one of the 3 companies, but then after grew to make sense to the 4th one who arrived. But today is where the difficulty is when an application starts to do a little bit of everything. And there is where our job becomes even more complicated, because when we want to optimize or start to remove pieces, decompose the monolith, that is even more difficult because it's cross different domains. But I think that is happening in many companies, even more when the company has been merged.
And that's often a consequence, of these acquisitions is, as many people know, you've got, as Nathalie said, a collection of applications that do the same thing, for different customer segments or different products, or the same customer segments or the same products. And a big part of, what increases the complexity of the application landscape is, are those acquisitions, because, you don't just acquire the customers and the products and the employees, you acquire all of these, IT assets. And a big part of organizations being successful, moving forward past acquisition, is trying to figure out how can we become masters of this complexity as opposed to becoming victims of it. Because again, but that's where we think architecture really has an opportunity to shine, because that's one of the important outcomes that architecture is trying to deliver. Because there is inherent complexity in a lot of these business, but we don't need to make it any harder than it already is. So to help guide the new solution teams to align with open digital architecture and the philosophies that support it, particularly event-driven architecture and microservices, we've collected a set of, I think we've identified about 130 patterns right now, Nathalie, which is a lot and far more than we're going to use immediately. But in a lot of cases, you want to cast the net wide, and then we're making some very deliberate decisions about, these are the 10 or 20 patterns that are really critical to support some of the monolithic decomposition and legacy retirement activities. So step one, again, is collecting all of those patterns. And then we're starting to elaborate them so that we can, provide guidance to the solution teams. But a big part of what we're going to be working on in the upcoming weeks and months is getting this out of kind of theoretical land and actually get it into practical application. And I don't know if you want to talk about that, Nathalie.
Yeah, it's where we are really extending our knowledge to the solution engineering, to the solution architect from the enterprise architecture, and we are creating this task force to start to break the monolith and go to ODA component. So for that is where we are going to ensure that we are aligned with those patterns and that we provide them and they understand them, because there's to be also training. So try to really work hand by hand with whoever is going to implement our ODA capabilities. So it's good timing now to have all of that, because we are creating this cells of work with we are looking at a mix of solution architects, engineer, developers, to be able to work also in partnership with the provider, but we want to keep the skills in the house. So this interesting approach where enterprise architecture is not anymore in a pretty repository, but is alive on is really used day by day on we are a reference and we are helping and participate.
And one of the big things that we're going to be helping the teams with is, of course, we want them to, document the critical parts of the architecture in the repository in accordance with the new agile architecture method and structure. But for patterns particularly, one of the big things we want to try to get out of it as soon as we can is harvest examples of how these patterns have been used at AT&T Mexico. So, as you'll see on the next slide, we're starting with, pretty typical generic descriptions of the pattern so that hopefully people, again, understand why they should care about this pattern, what this the problems it solves, the side effects and consequences and implications, different kinds of strategies, all that good stuff. And then, of course, there's models of the patterns. But what's really going to, I think, make this resonate with the practitioner community is, hey, I get the idea behind this pattern and what it means conceptually, but if I could see a real world example of how this pattern was used here at AT&T Mexico in the 21st century, that's really going to help I think, with people accepting these as legitimate patterns, and also provide, again, a lot of great contextual guidance on, what does this really mean in the real world. So what we're doing is, this kind of represents our end game. Well, not our end game, but one of the steps. So kind of our approach is we have a catalog, like we said, of about 130 patterns, and that helps us again prioritize and focus on those subset of patterns that are most critical. So they've got a name and they've got a description. And then what we've decided recently is we're actually going to take an intermediate step so that before we just go ahead and detail out all of these patterns, again, we're kind of trying to do it in a segmented, prioritized way. But we're going to create, for some of these patterns, an outline, because we don't want people to feel like they need to wait until the pattern is completely specified in accordance with, best practices, which is again represented here. That, and again, trying to embrace the agile nature of this stuff, which is, we don't have to have a perfect description of a model of a pattern completely done the way it's supposed to be done. Just, the name of the pattern, a description, maybe a quick overview that we might copy, from, a PowerPoint slide or a website, and maybe some links, because at least that'll get people going. Again, it doesn't need to be, perfect. And then as we work with the teams applying the patterns, we'll get those examples that we'll be able to supplement the core pattern descriptions, and again, continue to evolve the formal description. So, we're following, again, a pattern for patterns, as you might not be surprised, where every pattern, has an intent, a description of the problem and the forces that are causing us to need to solve some sort of problem. But then, we're trying to get a little formal with, what are the parts of this pattern? So that's represented by, kind of a class-like diagram, although we're still using Archimate. But of course, one of the cool things about Enterprise Architect is that while, Archimate is the language of choice for TM Forum and AT&T Mexico, we can still use some of the UML features of Enterprise Architect. In particular, on the right, we're using sequence diagrams, to represent the behavior of those patterns. And then I think the last topic, if I'm not mistaken, Nathalie, is API governance. And so this is a draft version, and so it's not finished, and there's of course a lot more to it. People will recognize the link icon in the lower right-hand corner of some of these processes. So there's definitely more to it than just this. But as many people know, when you start transitioning into an API-driven approach without governance and oversight, you can find yourself with an overproliferation of APIs that do the same thing that aren't really well governed. And again, that's a part of what the EA team led by Nathalie and Tony are trying to help the organization focus on. It's not just about creating APIs because that's what people do today. We need to create the right APIs at the right time and the right way. So I don't know if you have any, comments about that, Nathalie.
Well, yes, we have now strong tools to do a API gateway where we can do SLAs, we can do a lot of things. But if we don't control what is uploaded there, and sometimes, basic things like who is the owner, what is the description, what is for.
Right.
So we did this work with our newly APIs, with our core management components we already deployed last year. But now we need to bring on board everything else, from the ESB, our billing system, prepaid, postpaid, because how do we want to improve it if we don't know our as is, on how we can ensure is no duplication if we don't know what we are. So that is going to be a challenge on there where we really need to do governance. If you want more like to become police of, if you want to do an API, you need to come by us first, ensure first that they don't exist. If the one who exists you want to improve, and if you are following the TM forum specification.
Yep. And
We are
so
going to
just
be
like application, yep. And just like application development, there's, there could be multiple APIs that kind of have overlapping requirements. We want to consolidate those. There might be APIs on some of the legacy platform like ESB that we want to move away from, and we need to migrate, to a new open API implementation, and then of course, eventually deprecate and retire those APIs. So I think we just got a couple of minutes left, Nathalie. So I think, yep. So here we are. I guess with the conclusions. I don't know if you want to wrap it up here, Nathalie, and then we can maybe take a question or two if there's any time.
Well, I think we're in a very exciting time where we came from to be a far away group who are not sure what they are doing to now really become focused on the or CIO put architecture on data as part of his main pillars. So it's where we were supposed to be, and we are finally getting there. And it's going to be demanding but interesting.
All right. Well, I think that's what we wanted to talk about. So, like I said, I don't know if there's any questions, and we might have a chance to answer a couple.
Yep, there are a few questions. So the first question is, well, a comment. This is some great work. Is AT&T Mexico planning on contributing some of this work back to the TM forum for other telcos to leverage?
Yes, of course.
You guys are always doing a lot of sharing.
Yeah,
the next question.
we have been working with our peers, AT&T US and Cricket. And the idea is we participate also with the BA Guild. The idea is to share what we are doing with everybody else. That's why I'm here today.
Okay, the next question is for Chris. Chris, when you shared the meta model slide, there looked to be multiple standards blended together. Is this unique for AT&T Mexico, or is the pick and choose approach becoming more common with organizations you work with?
Obviously it kind of depends, but, one of the nice things, 2024, there's a lot more, relevant content from many different standards organizations. Some of them are, industry vertical, like the TM Forum. Some of them are more practice oriented, like the Business Architecture Guild or INCOSI in the case of systems engineering. So, I think there's an opportunity to do that kind of hybrid blending of standards today that really wasn't possible maybe, certainly 10 years ago. So, I think that it is becoming more prevalent in the different industries that I've been working in. So it is not uncommon.
But for us was our vision. We wanted to bring TOGAF, we wanted to bring Archimate, we wanted to find a tool where we could really implement and not only have definitions. And we wanted also to leverage TM Forum. So it's where I met Chris at that point where I was, okay, nothing is there. What can I do? How can I do it? This year we continue because we added the Business Architecture Guild value stream and capabilities that really help us to, I think the idea is to take the best of each word and to make work what is good for you. We are not purists. We are trying to be practical. We are adjusting. In our case, we also had the Agile software factory, where also sometimes the definition of the names were the same or was confusing everybody. But we try to clarify. But you need to. You cannot only stay on one. Or not depending on the we're in telecommunication, so we must have TM Forum. But TM Forum was not offering this really hands-on, was not a tool where you could extend and implement their frameworks. And it's what we had with the Sparx.
Okay. So Nathalie, another question for you. When you were introduced, it sounds like your role spans both enterprise architecture and data governance. How are you bringing these two disciplines together, and what's your vision there?
Well, for enterprise architecture, you need to have input, right? So our input at the company level was the application. We need to know our assets. So with what we integrate with the ServiceNow, APM, CMDB. And we also needed to know our data, right? So we brought to the company things we didn't have yet, or the concept, data catalog, steward, more when we were also migrating to a data lake in the cloud. So it was even more important to understand all of this data we were having, because the idea is to don't migrate things that you don't use. So we are at this stage, we created a data committee. So if you want, my data governance part was really more focused on bringing the platform and the methodology. But the idea now is that the data committee become also more multidisciplinary. So the business is more involved. So I will have more like, if you want, a consultant position, because I want to dedicate more time to the enterprise architecture part. But we need to guide them, because until we don't get the tool. And as Chris showed at the beginning, we are integrated with many things that we need to be able to model properly and to take the decisions. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that was good. And then the last question, and then we'll wrap up, is this sounds like a very ambitious architecture effort. How are you going about finding the right resources with the right skills to staff this project?
Well, I can say that the people I'm working with with them since a long time. They have been following us. We were part of DirecTV Latam, we become AT&T Latam, and then we went to DirecTV, well, to AT&T Mexico. Chris, I know him since like 6 years more, something like that. So, and I think it's a small world. We have people who left, who came back, who even like Venezuela. I had a team in Venezuela who left, who went to Mexico because they could not stay in Venezuela. And I didn't know that I was going to be working in Mexico a year later. And I contacted with them, people that I had in Colombia that I could not bring with me because it was not an entity of AT&T there, but to came to work for us through a provider. Some architect to change company who came after to work with us too as a provider. I must say it's a small world. And when you have somebody who really has the knowledge of the telecommunication plus the knowledge of enterprise architecture or architecture solution, we take them with. But of course, what is a small team. So what we're really working the last 2 years is to make grow the rest of the team. What we arrived, enterprise architecture was very small. We were like 10 people. But last year, our CIO trusted us and brought together all of the architects who were in the different branch, specialty. And we finally were able to make a difference, because if you want, we were not only preaching to them, we were part of the same team, on the same hierarchy, same objective, which is easier. So it's where we are now, and now we need to deliver, because I think this year is the year of the transformation.
Okay, great. That was a great answer. I mean, I think events like this give people an opportunity to network, to find other people with the skills and knowledge and experience they're looking for to make those connections. And you're right, it is a small world, and very often the people we've worked with in the past become our team members and our partners in the future. So that's fantastic. Okay, so let me go ahead and wrap this up. I want to start by thanking Chris and Nathalie for joining today and sharing their insights with us. And thanks for all the people who attended and participated and asked the questions, for contributing your time and participating. The session recording will be posted on the EA Global Summit website and the Collaborate YouTube page after the event. And if you'd like to connect with Chris and or Nathalie, you can reach out to sales@sparxsystems.us and we will get you connected. If you happen to be also attending the INCOSE Western States Regional Conference this week, Chris will also be there if you want to talk to him live. So the next session will begin in a few minutes. You can find the session link in your registration email. Our next discussion is actually a panel discussion where we're talking about the biggest problems, business problems that organizations are addressing through architecture. So that's going to be an exciting discussion. So we thank you again for joining this session and look forward to having you join us on the next session of EA Global Summit 2024. Thanks and have a great day.
Hey, thanks everybody.